Can you guys see me now? I only see one person in the chat room, so I'm not sure if anybody's on. We were having some technical difficulties. AO1's still trying to get uh, on screen. And somehow I was not able to get on till just now. So if anybody is in the chat room or if John can let me know if you see me. I'm not getting a response. I don't know if that's because no one can see me or if because nobody is checked in. So, oh, yeah, it looks like we may have. I'm not sure what the problem is, but I don't know if you can hear me or not. All right, well, it doesn't look like we have an audience. And since you can't get on, I could sit here and talk to myself, but oh, there's June. Hi, June. We're having some technical difficulties, so we're not sure if we're going to be able to go forward today or not. Oh, there's Kathy. Okay, there's a couple people coming in. Aowen is not able to log on if you guys haven't been listening. So we're waiting for her, but I don't mind going forward alone as long as we've got some viewers. It's a little strange talking to myself, but okay. Okay, so everyone says to go ahead and go forward. So let's do it. So we're here to wrap up our Kenya adventure. Kenya was, like all of our adventures, quite interesting. I never know when I set these up if they're going to work or not. I get nervous with each one that we're not going to have any success, but we had a significant amount of success, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. And I also kind of want to talk about. I think we've now finished our fourth tour, so that's 60 notables that we've been working on, and 4 different nations. And what would that be? That'd be 12 weeks. So that's 3 months that we've been doing this. So we're getting at a point now where I'm beginning to pick up some patterns and seeing what's working and what's not working. And then also noticing the significant differences between the 4 countries. There's been a lot of we learn a lot of things with each country, and some of that gets transferred over to the next country. But a lot of it we're starting fresh because it's different types of records, different type of culture, different type of values that the culture has towards not only genealogy but record keeping in general, family units, naming patterns, all that kind of stuff. So we'll talk about a little bit about that today. Going back to our previous 3 countries, we did India, Argentina, and Ukraine. And I'm happy to note that people are still working on those 3 countries and the profiles that we had left incompleted. We have somebody who I have not been able to identify yet has gone back and done some really solid biographies, which is good. The 3 weeks for 15 notables plus all their families, we've had anywhere from 100 to 400 family members added to each of those 15 notables. That's a lot of profiles, and 3 weeks is not a whole lot of time to not only connect but also work on the biographies, get the sources, all of that stuff. So I'm glad to see that there are individuals that are still going back and working on adding family members, and more importantly, getting some really nice bios up. If you go back and read any of the bios for the notables of the last 3 countries, somebody's done a really good job, and that's good, because it's, it's nice to have all the factual stuff up there, but it's even better if visitors can go and actually learn something and enjoy their visit rather than just getting the facts and figures that we bore our family with as genealogists so often. I see Thomas and Christina both checked in. That's good. So again, the previous 3 countries, we're still doing good on. Now we're in Kenya. So what's interesting about Kenya? Kenya was a British colony for some 50 years or so in the 20th century, early 20th century. They gained their independence in the early 60s, and they have had 5 presidents now. 4 of those presidents were among our notables. One of those was the 5th one was actually the son of one of our notables, so he's indirectly one of our notables. So all 5 of the presidents were on our list, in either directly or indirectly. The one thing that stands out to me first off with all of these countries, they don't know as much about their leaders as we do about ours. We know some very intimate details about our presidents and governors and senators, including their family members. In Kenya, for example, and we found this also with to a degree in India, not so much in Ukraine, but we did it with or Argentina, but with India we did. The people don't know about their leaders or their families. And when I'm reading newspaper articles about for example, the newly elected president of Kenya, a lot of these articles it's almost like investigative journalism. They say, we think he may have 5 children, or he may have 4 children. We think his wife's name was this, or very, very, they're very unsure. And it just doesn't seem to be something that that the powers that be want out. I compared it when we were doing Ukraine to the Soviet Union. Ukraine is much more open, but when they were part of the Soviet Union, it was the same thing. We don't know much about Vladimir Putin's family, if anything at all, particularly compared to our own president's family. So that's a good example of a culture that either doesn't see a need to share that information or actually has a desire to hide that information. So so when we're doing genealogy and we're doing research, that's one of the big challenges, is that information isn't part of the public record. These people are out there, but even just finding a newspaper article that says who the president's children are is not an easy task. But we overcame that, and that's the thing that's amazing with this project that we're doing. The members that have been working on this do an outstanding job of finding out of the ordinary resources, sharing them, and then using those resources to put a family together. We start typically to go through a little bit of the process. We typically start with WikiTree and just see what's out there, on the most obvious site. What does it list for family members? Does it list the spouse? Does it list the children? Does it list the parents? A lot of times we can get that there. The second thing is just a Google search and see what comes up, online biographies. Now, Kenya is interesting because they seem to have a very active online community. there are a lot of blogs, a lot of private websites that we were able to find that talk about the various people that we were researching. And they often have information that the newspapers, the more public things don't have. Now we've got to weigh the legitimacy of those comments. I found for the first time of the 4 countries we've done, Kenya seemed to be very big into conspiracy theories, and when talking about their leaders in particular, people going on saying, this is what the government wants you to believe, but this isn't true. Here's the true story. Somehow I know what the truth is, even though nobody else does. Not a whole lot unlike some of what we see in some of the media out here in the United States. So once we do Google and once we get the WikiTree information, the basic stuff, then we can start doing a deeper search. And one of the tricks that we found was rather than Googling the notable themselves, which we do, but Googling the family members, because that's going to take you to a site. Even if the article is about the notable, it's also going to share information about their family as opposed to their political careers and other things that are going on. If you Google the president of Kenya, you're going to get all kinds of information. But if you Google his child's name or his brother's name, you're going to get articles that are connected to his family, or maybe not connected to the president himself, but to one of the information that's specifically about a relative that maybe has nothing to do with the politics. And from there, we were able to expand it. So that's one of the tricks that we've used. The biggest obstacle I think we've had is that the sources that I've just mentioned tend to give names and relationships, but not much else. So we're not getting a lot of dates and places, and maybe some places, but not so much dates. So we can do some estimated dates when building profiles. You can estimate the parents' dates, maybe the brothers and sisters' dates, the children's dates. You start going beyond that. You start getting into aunts and uncles and great aunts and uncles and second cousins. It's difficult to estimate dates with any real accuracy. So the question then becomes, do we create a profile or not if we really have no biographical information and the only date that we can come up with is really an arbitrary guess? So that's been one of the challenges that we've had. The other thing is a lot of the people that we're reading about are still living or may not be living. We don't know. We just know their names. So whether they're alive or not, we don't know. So that becomes another question, is when do we create profiles for living people who are not famous? And when do we not? And basically the consensus has been that we do not add profiles for the living non-notable people unless we need to have them there in order to make the link. So we're doing a lot of our work off of WikiTree. I know I do mine primarily on Ancestry. I put the tree together. And once I've got it solidified, I then go in and add it to WikiTree. So I know by that point whether I'm going to need a profile for a non-living person. And every once in a while, we've had to do a spouse or a child in order to get the in-laws in. But we have a lot of potential profiles out there that we haven't we haven't actually created profiles for. So anyway, so that's just kind of a little bit of the process that we've gone through. So let me get some facts for you. One of the things that we've focused on primarily is making connections. And something that I've emphasized in the past sessions is that when we're doing connections is just one way to keep score. It's kind of a fun way to get a number figure, but it's really not the only way to measure success. One of the things that I mentioned earlier in the session or in this talk was that we want to get biographies written, we want to get sourcing, and also there's a number of factors that go into counting connected profiles. that can skew the numbers. So when we start comparing countries to each other, it gets a little misleading. For example, when we were in India, we had 250 new profiles created, but we didn't connect any of those individuals to the main wiki tree. We had one individual that had 59 relatives that we were able to find, but we still weren't able to connect it to the tree. On the other hand, this time around, we had an individual who we only connected to 3 people, only created 3 profiles, and had her connected. I forget exactly the path we took, but she had a husband whose parents, I think, were on WikiTree already. So all we had to do is connect him to his parents, and she was connected to the tree. So we had that done on day 1. So it's really, again, difficult to keep track that way. Then the other thing is, once we connect somebody to the main tree, I can no longer keep track of the numbers of new family members, because anybody we connect at that point, anywhere on the tree, is going to ultimately be a relative. So we have to stop counting once we make the connection. So if we make the connection and then we continue to add more relatives, those people don't get counted. The other thing is, as I was saying with the living notables, some of these people, we have a couple dozen relatives that we did not create profiles for, and that technically should be counted as connected relatives, but because we chose for privacy reasons not to create those profiles, that throws the numbers off as well. So anyway, let me give you some numbers. This time around, of our 15 Kenyan profiles, we were able to connect 5 of them to the main wiki tree. We also created, as of this morning, we had 182 new profiles that we created of Kenyan, some notables, but mostly non-notables. So that's almost at the 200 mark. And again, if you count all the people whose we didn't create profiles for because they were living, or profiles we created after we connected those 5 living personalities, the number would be well over 200 new profiles. So considering Kenya's history, the lack of records, etc., I think that's not too shabby. Let me tell you a little bit about a couple of them. I'm going to look here at these comments because I see them coming in, but it's a little difficult for me to read while I'm talking. So excuse me just a minute, and let me see if there's anything I want to comment on before we move on. Again, it's a little odd not having a second person's voice to share here, but so a comment on the lack of written records prior to the colonization, which again did not occur until the early 1900s, I believe, if I'm correct. So there is a lot of oral history in Kenya and countries like Kenya, very similar to our own Native Americans here in the United States. Their standards for accepting oral tradition are different than what there might be in Western culture. Here we emphasize it just because your grandmother told you or your grandfather told you this was the family story doesn't make it true. I think in a lot of these other cultures, if your grandmother or your grandfather told you the story, then it's true. And it very well may be. So the question then becomes, how much weight do we give that? In the case of President Kenyatta, who was the first president of Kenya, his immediate family is well documented through newspapers and other recent sources. You start to go back further, it's a little it's not as documented, but he has family oral history that's been passed down through his native tribe, and it's considered valid in Kenyan culture. It's very well. It's not written in a document, but it's been passed down from generation to generation, and it's considered it's considered legitimate. Now, so how do we handle that? My solution for that has been we post it and you post the source. You say that this was oral tradition. I don't know if it would fly for the pre 1700 profiles, but for the post 1700 profiles, I think as long as we state clearly the source of the information, I think it's valid. And in fact, I think it's important that we put that up there because to hide that information just because it doesn't meet our Western standards doesn't seem right to me. In another case, there was another one of our notables. I'm trying to make sure I get my story straight. Grace Ogot, I think is how she pronounces her name. She was an author and a politician, one of the first women to hold public office in Kenya. Her brother was the ambassador to the United States. No, I'm sorry, to the United Nations from Kenya. He has been on one of the other Ancestry websites, genealogy websites, and has posted his family tree. He is listed as the host of that tree, so it apparently comes directly from him. And he has listed his grandparents, his great-grandparents, and his great-great-grandparents. And again, he does not, would not have been alive, so he doesn't have firsthand knowledge of that, but he's written it down as family tradition. And I think if he's gotten that from his grandmother, and that was her parents and her grandparents, it's probably pretty accurate. So again, we put that in there, and individuals that are researching his tree later down the road can decide for themselves whether they want to count that or not. But yeah, that is one of the difficulties we have when we move outside of the Western culture, is that the standards for genealogy are maybe not the same as ours. Yeah, and here Thomas has given a few comments along those lines. Reading the notes here real quickly again. Yeah, and Thomas is saying that the English arrived around the 1880s, and that's probably true as I'm thinking it through. I should have that in front of me, but yeah, they were probably there as early as the late 1800s, and I believe the Germans were there before that, and so it's and the Arabs were there before that. It was Zanzibar at one point, which was an Arab trading post. So they have a long history of Western contact, but the peoples themselves were mostly villagers who did not keep birth certificates, death certificates, marriage certificates, etc. In fact, when President Kenyatta got married, he was married in a tribal ceremony, and when he converted to Christianity, he was forced to get remarried because his wife became pregnant, and they wanted to. The Christian church didn't think the tribal ceremony was valid, so he had to have a second marriage in order to make the child legitimate under the Catholic churches. I think it was the Anglican Church of Scotland that he was with. So even that recently, there was still they were still not using Western standards for recording things. Let's see what I want to also go over here. We also had the first two that we connected. Joy Adamson was the author of Born Free. That was one of my grandmother's favorite movies when I was growing up. We watched that multiple times. I still remember the song. She was connected through one of her husbands. She was the first. She was connected on day one. She had, I think, 3 husbands, and one of them had some. I don't think they were necessarily nobility, but they were prominent people back in Europe, and so he was pretty easy. They were already on WikiTree. Somebody just hadn't quite made the connection that connected Joy Adamson. But we had that done on day one. On day two, Daphne Sheldrick, who was also of a European background, she was a conservationist, worked primarily with elephants. She was connected on day two, so that was we were off to a really pretty good start. And then we connected Lupita Nyong'o, the actress, the Academy Award-winning actress. She was actually born in Mexico, but her parents were from Kenya. They were there on for diplomatic reasons, and her family is all in Kenya. But we were also able to connect her. She has a number of relatives that have moved to the United States, so we were able to make that connection as well. And then President Kenyatta and Grace Ogot were the remaining two. Something that let's see. I found kind of a pattern in our process here, and something I don't know how many people, if anybody that's listening right now, is new or has chosen not to participate in the 15 Nations Global Tour. I think it's very intimidating to a lot of people. When they hear Kenyan genealogy, they don't know anything about it, and they maybe turn away. We get a lot of comments for people who are really enthusiastic and supportive of the project. But when it comes down to it, there's only a handful of people that are actually doing the work, which is fine because we're doing an amazing job. But I'd like to see more people get involved. And one of the things I want to say to anybody that's thinking about it or feeling intimidated by it, there's a couple of things. First off, none of us know what we're getting into when we start. When we started with Kenya, who in America, other than maybe people from Kenya, know anything about Kenyan genealogy? It's not something that is taught or focused here. And so we're really starting from scratch, and we put our heads together and we figure it out. The first week, each time the first week has been a little bit discouraging for me. I don't know how we're going to get anything. We had a couple, easy pickings on this one, the first two on day 1 and 2, and then things just kind of stagnated and we kind of fumbled around for several days. And then we started getting some breaks, and we started finding some newspaper articles and finding some family members. As I mentioned, the Grace Ogot's brother was the American ambassador. Well, he moved, or the ambassador to the United Nations in America. When he left that position, he stayed in America. He married an American woman. However, she was of Italian descent, and she came from a really large family. I think there were something in her father's family, something like 10 children that were all American born. But they all married Italians also, and just one spouse after the other, we were tracing back to Italy. We finally found one that we were able to trace back to Czechoslovakia. That didn't do us much good either. And then finally we found one who had long-time American roots. And we traced her back, and we found a great-great-great-grandfather who was on WikiTree already. But we couldn't find the evidence. On Ancestry.com, somebody's made the connection, several people have made the connection, but nobody had the source. So we were at a standstill with that. We found another line that went back just as far, but then ended up in Ireland. And we weren't able to get the records there. Another line went to Cuba. So it was just one dead end after another. And then finally we found one that went back. And even though we didn't have solid proof, we had enough circumstantial evidence. The families lived in the same area. They're the right size. They had they lived on farms next door to each other. So there was enough evidence based on what we had that we'd made that connection. But that was week 2. Most of that was in week 2. We started putting things together. Week 2, we got very enthusiastic after being discouraged week 1 because things were falling into place. And we started making connections, and we got number 3 connected, number 4 connected. And I found that same pattern with the previous 3 countries, that it seemed like week 1 was really a struggle. Week 2 was really rewarding. And then came week 3, where it seemed like we started to exhaust all of our resources, and things started slowing down again, and we started making fewer connections. But that was okay because that also gave us time to go back and solidify some things, fine-tune some things, work on some biographies, make sure our sources were in order. So that worked out fine. And then as far as making our fifth connection, that occurred last night. And it was in consultation with a couple individuals who'd been working on the tree. That was Grace of God's family with the ambassador, and we finally made the connection. We were trying really hard to get it done by Monday so that we could announce it here, and we did it. So that's a little bit of the pattern. So again, if you're brand new and you're not sure if this is something for you, just remember that we're all facing that same thing in the beginning, and it's fine if you just stick with it. The other thing I'll say is if you can't make the connections, if that's too difficult, you're not sure what to do. It looks like my camera is off here, but okay. If you can't make the connection, work on biographies. Help us with some cleanup. A lot of times we're in such a rush. We get a lot of facts listed on the profile, but they're a little bit disjointed. Go in and write it into a narrative form. There's a lot of things that, that we can do to work on these profiles besides actually doing research. So if you're finding the research is too hard, that doesn't mean there isn't still, in fact, not just a place for you, but actually a need for you, because those of us that are doing the research aren't having time to do the biographies and putting all that together. And so if you just want to go in and make things look good, that's fine. You can also go back to the previous 3 countries and work on those. You're not stuck with being in the country where we are. So anyway, I think that's enough for Kenya. So if you're ready, I will share with you our next stop. For our next stop, we're going back to the Americas. We are going to take a trip to the Caribbean, and we will be visiting the nation of Haiti. I think Haiti is going to be a pretty interesting visit. I've been through, we picked the 15 individuals, and I think there's going to be some really interesting stories that we uncover. I think we have a good chance of making some connections based on the little bit of research that I found, but even if we don't make the connections, I think the stories that we're going to uncover are going to be really, really pretty intriguing. Now, I'm going to see if I can pull up my screen. This is new to me. Let's see. Give me just 1 second here. Okay. Okay. And this is the wrong page, but if you'll give me a second here, I'm going to go back to, I'm going to find you the Kenya site so you can see what we're looking at here. I'm sorry, the Haiti site. Okay, and just so you know, I cannot see the screen and follow the chat at the same time. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them, but I won't be able to see them till the end. Okay, so here's our list of 15 Haitian notables. Number 1 is King Henry I. I don't know how many of you know this, but briefly after Haiti had a revolution against the Spaniards that was led by the slaves. And it is the only nation, I believe, in the world, but at least in the Americas, that was founded by slaves who revolted. It was taken back from the Europeans. And during that early process, they had a single king, and his name was King Henry I. And he is our first notable. It'll be interesting to see, being that he was a monarch. He was a slave who became a king, which is the classic kind of rags to riches story. Again, that's going to be a fascinating one to read about. Um, but it'll be interesting to see, being that he was a monarch, how well documented his family is. And I'm going to really screw up some of these names because they're in French and I don't speak any French. So please bear with me as I mangle them, as I've done with the previous 4 countries also. Marie Madeleine Lachenius. No, you can read it. And she was the mistress of a Haitian president. And then after she was done with him, became the mistress of a second Haitian president. She apparently had extreme sway over both presidencies, and she is known as the most powerful woman in Haitian history. She basically ruled the country through her relationships. Excuse me. Sorry about that. So she ruled, kind of indirectly over the country for a while. I've just not directly, but through her influence. So that's again going to be an interesting individual to read about. Oswald Durand is a poet. He is considered today to be Haiti's national poet. Don't know much about him. Again, I've said this with the previous countries. I don't do a lot of research on these people. I basically take a look at their Wikipedia pages. I do some research into how famous they are in the country. They need to meet a few other criteria, like not having a well-built tree already on WikiTree. Something as a side note, one thing that I will say, almost all of these individuals have WikiTree pages already. Somebody went through and created a whole bunch of Haitian profiles, and that's great. However, almost none of them have any family connections, no spouses, parents, children, etc. So even though I didn't create most of these profiles, they were created by somebody else, but they're still basically undeveloped profiles. Most of them had been orphaned, so I'm not sure. I didn't go back and do the research to figure out who created them, but it's saved me a lot of work this time, so I appreciate whoever did that. Antenor Furman, an anthropologist. During his career, an individual from France, I believe, wrote a book on the superiority of the white race over the black race. And Furman became famous because he wrote a book countering that, explaining how all races are basically created equal, and that color or racial background has nothing to do with a person's value or abilities. So he became famous for that document. Cincinnatus LeConte. Okay, Cincinnatus LeConte was the 19th president of Haiti. He has a few interesting things in his story, but I didn't pick him for his own career, because of all the presidents of Haiti, his is not necessarily anything spectacular. But this is the anniversary, I believe it's the 101st anniversary coming up of the Titanic. And Cincinnatus LeConte had a nephew whose family was the only African-American family aboard the Titanic. His nephew was killed. His nephew's wife and 2 daughters survived. I was not aware that there were any African-American families on the Titanic. And in speaking with the Titanic Project, I was informed that there were actually Titanic survivors from all over the world, including China, Japan, Syria, Egypt. The list just went on and on. That was fascinating to me. So anyway, we agreed to work with the Titanic Project. Cincinnatus is not connected to his nephew, so we're going to have to figure out who his siblings were and who was the father of the Titanic survivor, whose name I don't have in front of me, but we'll get that out there. But ideally, we can connect not only a Haitian notable, but also a Titanic survivor in the same breath. So anyway, that's going to be an interesting one. Constantine Enriquez. He is the first Black athlete to win an Olympic gold medal. He was a rugby player. He later introduced the sport to Haiti. Didn't find a lot of information about him, as important of a person as he was, so it'll be interesting to see what we can find out about him. But again, very first African American or Black individual to win an Olympic gold medal. I should say Black because, as opposed to African American, because that includes Africans themselves. Hector Hippolyte, Grandmaster of Haitian art. Don't know a lot about him, but he is one of Haiti's top artists. This one is a fascinating story. Faustin E. Workus. He was a Marine. He was stationed in Haiti prior to World War II, I believe. He met the queen of one of their islands, and the queen made him king. And for 3 years, he served as king of this island. At the end of the 3 years, the Marines called him back, so he resigned as king, went back to his homeland, and the rest is history. But for 3 years, he was the king of this island off the coast of Haiti. So again, it's going to be an interesting story to uncover. The next one is a not so nice man, Papa Doc Duvalier. I was very familiar with him when I was in high school and college. He was basically a dictator, a very brutal dictator. I included him because I think he probably had more influence over the country of Haiti than just about anyone else, even though it was not necessarily positive. His son, Baby Doc, took over after him and was comparably brutal. Don't know much else about that family, but they played a major role for about, I think, over 30 years they were in office. So I think it's an important one to include, even though he's not such a beloved figure. Jacques Romain. Again, don't know much about him. He was an author. He was a Marxist author, but considered one of the leading literary figures of Haiti. Dr. Yvonne Sylvain. She was the first female physician in Haiti. Don't know much about her as well, but that's a pretty honorable accomplishment she had there. Max Beauvoir, I'm going to say. Max Beauvoir was called the Pope of Voodoo. He was a biologist, PhD, who became the head priest of the Voodoo religion and tried to kind of bring it into the mainstream. Another interesting story to be heard there. Ariel Henry is the current prime minister of Haiti. Now I'm going to jump ahead and then come back to Ariel Henry. Jovenel Moise, again, hopefully I'm pronouncing that, maybe Moise. Anyway, he was the president previously. He was assassinated back in 2021. That was pretty big in the news, so some of you may remember that. He was assassinated. His wife was shot and flown to Florida for surgery, and they were shot in their home. It was a big investigation as to how people got into their home, when there was security, etc. Some people think Ariel Henry had something to do with it. Since the assassination of the president, Haiti has not had a president, and the prime minister is not elected. He was appointed, so there is currently no elected government in Haiti. Simply this appointed prime minister and his team of people. That's a bit of an issue there. Haiti is going through a lot of turmoil right now, and this guy is kind of at the head of it. So again, some interesting stories with what's going on currently as well as in the past. And then perhaps the most famous Haitian in America, at least, Wyclef Jean, used to be a member of the Fugees. Um, he tried to run for president of Haiti, but was not allowed to because they said he didn't meet the residency restrictions. He is one of the few, I generally don't put living people on here other than the prime minister. But every once in a while I throw in one just because I think they're important figures. So there's our 15. I will have this posted by tomorrow. In the meantime, if you would like to go to the website, you can go to any of our previous nations and just change the nation out for Haiti. So you can go to the Kenya website and up in your address bar, just replace Kenya with Haiti and it'll take you there. Otherwise, you can wait till tomorrow and I'll have it posted on G2G and in Discord. Thomas has offered to put some pronunciations in. I would really appreciate that because I read these names, I get familiar with them, but I don't hear them said out loud. So when I start to pronounce them here, I'm sure I'm not doing them justice. But yeah, he did that for Ukraine, and that was terrific. I'd like to see maybe even getting a team of people up that can start doing that for profiles because it's really helpful for those of us that like to read the profiles of the notables. And let's see, I'm just going to check here if there's any other comments. Yeah, Kathy is saying, this is a great way to learn. I have learned so much about our 4 nations that we've covered, things that I never knew. We didn't learn about Kenya in school. And even if we had, that was a long time ago, so things have changed quite a bit. Reading the biographies, the biographical information, reading newspaper articles that are, covering them as current events. We use the metaphor of this being a global tour. And when you take a tour to other countries, at least if you do like I do, some of us just like to sit on the beach and relax, but I like to get in and learn about the country, learn about the historical places, the people, and this is just like a virtual world tour. I'm learning so much about these countries that I never knew, and it's just fascinating. And we get isolated in our own cultures, and we kind of start to think that the whole world is either like us or is primitive and behind us. But these countries, going back to the 1800s, they may not have been as developed in certain ways as the Western world, but they sure had their own cultures and their politics and their ways of doing things that it's really, really fascinating. We were talking about Zanzibar earlier. Zanzibar, that was, I believe, 1500s. And they're trading with Syria and the Middle East, and they're introducing Islam to the African coast, and so there was just so much going on, and that was 500 plus years ago. So it really is, even if we made no connections on this project, just the amount that I've been able to learn has really been rewarding. So if nobody has any questions, we're almost at 5 o'clock here. Well, at least my time, I guess, 6 o'clock Eastern time. And again, I will post this on G2G tomorrow. I will post it on Discord tomorrow, the link, and we'll see what we can do with Haiti. If anybody wants to stick around in Kenya, feel free. If anybody wants to go back to India, Ukraine, or Argentina, feel free. And we'll take it from there. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.